Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe and turn on notifications. Victor Sterling did not consider himself a suspicious man. Suspicion was an inefficient emotion, a wasteful allocation of cognitive resources, based on incomplete data. At 41, he was a senior risk analyst for a powerful Zurich-based syndicate, a career he had built on the bedrock of numbers, predictable patterns, and a disciplined trust in verifiable systems. His life was a meticulously balanced ledger. He trusted the financial models that predicted market volatility. He trusted the security protocols that protected his clients' assets. And for 6 years, he had trusted in the primary variable of his personal life. Cora Sterling, 34, was an art consultant. She operated in a world of abstracts, of subjective value and chaotic creativity, a stark contrast to his own. He had catalogued this contrast as a net positive. Victor's life was constructed from black and white columns. Cora brought uncontrolled splashes of color. He would come home from his sterile office in Crestwood's financial district to find their apartment filled with the scent of oil paints from a new artist's work, canvases leaning against their minimalist furniture, and stories of eccentric gallery owners. The arrangement worked. It was a closed system, in equilibrium. They did not have children. The decision had been a mutually ratified clause in their marital contract, discussed and agreed upon early on. Cora claimed she was not ready for that level of permanent installation in her life, and Victor saw no logical reason to challenge this. The data supported their current lifestyle. Their combined income allowed for comfort, for travel, for the collection of both art and stability. Their life functioned as designed. Or, more accurately, that was the prevailing assumption. Until the Tuesday in early autumn, when the system suffered a critical failure. Change, Victor knew, often began not with a bang, but with a series of minor, almost imperceptible deviations from the baseline. His job was to detect such deviations. For the past 2 months, Cora had become a source of anomalous data. It was nothing overt, nothing that would trigger a high-level alert. But the data points were accumulating. Her response time to his messages, once reliably under 5 minutes, now occasionally stretched to over an hour. When he called from his business trips in the evenings, the conversations felt truncated. He could hear the background noise of a bustling cafe or a crowded street, even late at night. She was always out with friends, or at a gallery opening. Plausible explanations, but the frequency had increased by 17%. Most telling was her reaction whenever he suggested an early return from a trip. A flicker of something, not disappointment, but a kind of logistical panic, would cross her face before being suppressed. He logged these observations. He told himself it was stress from a new commission. He told himself he was overanalyzing, applying professional paranoia to his personal life. But a quiet, persistent algorithm was running in the back of his mind, and its conclusion was unsettling. Something was fundamentally wrong with the system. He chose, for the time being, to monitor the situation without taking action. The night before a scheduled 4-day risk assessment summit in Zurich, Victor was packing his suitcase with his usual efficiency. Shirts folded to precise dimensions, ties rolled to prevent creasing. Cora appeared in the bedroom doorway, leaning against the frame. She was scrolling through her phone, a device that seemed to have become a permanent extension of her hand. "Oh, before I forget," she said, her tone meticulously casual. "My cousin Chloe is going to stay for a few days. She's looking for work in the city and needs a place to crash." Victor paused, holding a folded shirt. "Chloe? The one from Portland?" Cora nodded, her eyes still fixed on the screen. "Yeah. Things didn't work out for her there. I thought we could help out. It'll be nice to have some company." The statement presented a logical inconsistency. The last time he had heard about Chloe, approximately 3 months ago, she had just started a promising new job at a design firm in Portland. The probability of her suddenly abandoning it to search for work in Crestwood seemed low. However, confronting this would require an emotional expenditure he was not prepared for. He filed the detail away. "Of course," Victor said, returning to his packing. "No problem." She offered a smile that did not quite align with the expression in her eyes. It was a polite, public-facing smile. She quickly left the room, the tap-tap of her thumbs on her phone screen echoing down the hallway. Victor stood there, holding the perfectly folded shirt, and felt an unwelcome sensation in his chest. It was the feeling of an unaccounted-for variable, a loose thread in an otherwise perfect tapestry. He just didn't know what it was attached to. What Cora did not know, because it was information he had deemed unnecessary to share, was that 3 weeks prior, Victor had installed a high-resolution security camera in their garage. The decision was not driven by emotion or suspicion. It was a logical response to a documented external threat. A neighbor 2 houses down had been burglarized. The news had spread through the quiet, affluent neighborhood, and Victor, ever the risk analyst, had acted. He purchased a top-of-the-line German model with night vision, a wide-angle lens, and motion-activated alerts that sent notifications directly to his encrypted phone. He installed it himself, in a discreet corner, angled perfectly to capture the side door leading into the kitchen, and the entirety of the parking bay. He tested the system, confirmed its functionality, and then simply left it. It was phase 1 of a planned total home security upgrade he intended to present to her later. He just hadn't found the optimal time. And now, as he sat in his business-class seat on the flight to Zurich, the city of Crestwood shrinking below, Victor had no idea that his logical, precautionary measure was about to provide him with the data that would tear his calculated world apart. The summit in Zurich was exactly as Victor had anticipated, a series of dry presentations on regulatory compliance, emerging market threats, and algorithmic risk mitigation. He sat in the third row, taking notes on his tablet, his mind processing the information with detached efficiency. It was familiar territory. It was safe. His phone vibrated in his pocket. A single, short buzz. He ignored it. It was likely a market update, or an email from his subordinate. A few minutes later, it vibrated again. Then again. A persistent, rhythmic pattern. This was anomalous. His notification settings were calibrated to filter out low-priority alerts during conference hours. This pattern signified a priority 1 notification. Curiosity, an emotion he typically suppressed, won out. He discreetly unlocked the screen under the table. A string of notifications from the Heimsicherheit security app populated the screen. Motion detected. Garage. 22:18. Motion detected. Garage. 22:19. Recording started. Garage. 22:19. Victor frowned. It was nearly 10:30 at night in Crestwood. He had spoken to Cora an hour ago. She had said she was having a quiet dinner with Chloe, that they were just catching up. He assumed she was now home. He opened the live feed, expecting to see her familiar SUV pulling into its designated spot. What he saw instead made the controlled, air-conditioned atmosphere of the auditorium feel suddenly suffocating. A sleek, black coupe make and model he did not recognize was parked in the garage. The license plate was rendered in perfect, high-definition clarity. A man emerged from the driver's side. He was tall, clean-shaven, wearing a dark leather jacket. He moved with an unearned confidence, an alpha posture that suggested familiarity with the territory. He walked directly toward the side door to the kitchen. Like he knew exactly where he was going. He owned the space. And then, Cora appeared in the doorway to greet him. Victor's heart rate accelerated, a purely physiological response to a sudden, high-impact data input. The tablet in his hands felt unsteady. This was not the Cora who had spoken to him an hour ago. This Cora was wearing a short, form-fitting black dress he had never seen before. Her hair was down, styled in a way she only did for significant social events. Her makeup was immaculate. She smiled at the man. A genuine, unguarded smile that Victor hadn't seen directed at him in months. Then she hugged him. It was not a friendly, platonic hug. It was a full-body embrace. Long and intimate. When they pulled apart, the man cupped her face with both hands and kissed her. It was not a quick peck. It was a deep, slow, possessive kiss. Cora did not pull away. She leaned into it, her hands moving up to his shoulders. The blood pounded in Victor's temples, a dull, rhythmic thud that drowned out the sound of the keynote speaker on stage. The audience around him began to applaud, but he heard nothing. He felt a cold detachment, as if he were analyzing a security breach at a client's firm. Threat identified, breach confirmed. Protocol initiated. He rewound the footage by 10 seconds. He paused on the crystal-clear image of the license plate and took a screenshot. He saved it to a secure folder. Then, he watched the kiss again. And again, he needed to be certain of the data. The man slid his arm around Cora's waist, a gesture of casual ownership, and they disappeared into the house together. The side door clicked shut. The garage door slowly rolled down, plunging the scene into darkness, save for the faint glow of the camera's infrared light. The recording continued, showing only the empty garage, and the black coupe parked where Victor's car should have been. Victor stood up. He walked out of the auditorium, ignoring the curious glances of his colleagues. He needed to re-establish a controlled environment. He needed to process. He found a men's restroom, locked himself in a stall, and sat on the closed toilet lid, his phone still clutched in his hand. He opened his browser and navigated to a public records database he used for background checks, a gray market service, but highly reliable. He input the coupe's license plate number. He authorized the 20-franc payment for the expedited search. Less than 90 seconds later, he had a name. Reese Fallon. Age: 36. The name was a key to a door Victor hadn't known existed. He copied the name and pasted it into the search bar of a popular social media platform. The profile of Reese Fallon was public, a foolish lack of personal security, in Victor's opinion. The bio read simply, Reese Fallon, sculptor. The profile was a curated collection of arrogance. Photos of jagged, abstract metal sculptures. Photos of him in a dusty workshop, looking thoughtfully at a piece of steel. And then, there she was. Cora. She was in multiple photos, a recurring character in Reese Fallon's narrative. A picture from 2 months ago showed her laughing at a gallery opening, standing far too close to him. Another, from 6 weeks prior, was a candid shot of them sharing a bottle of wine on a restaurant patio, their heads nearly touching. The captions were professionally ambiguous: great to collaborate with the brilliant Cora Sterling, or celebrating a successful installation with the team. But the comments from their followers told a different story. Fire emojis. You two are perfect together. Cutest couple. One user had written, just make it official already. Victor felt the floor of the restroom stall tilt beneath him. This was not a recent indiscretion. This was a long-term, calculated campaign of deception. The distant behavior, the rushed phone calls. The lie about Chloe. They were no longer isolated anomalies. They were now part of a clear, undeniable pattern. This was a conspiracy. He locked his phone and pressed the heels of his palms against his eyes, applying pressure until he saw spots. The raw, unprocessed emotion was a liability. He needed to convert it into a plan. Rage was a chaotic force, cold, methodical anger was a tool. He would not scream. He would not break something. He was Victor Sterling. He was a risk analyst in a hotel restroom miles from home. And his wife, his primary asset, the cornerstone of his personal portfolio, was with another man, in the bed they shared. The asset was compromised. It was time for liquidation. Sleep was a biological necessity he could not afford that night. He returned to his hotel room, a sterile, impersonal space, and lay on the perfectly made bed, staring at the ceiling. The phone was beside him. He reopened the security app again and again, re-watching the footage. He analyzed it like a stock chart, looking for a flaw, a detail he might have misinterpreted. But the data was immutable. It always ended the same way: Cora and Reese, walking into his house, together. He considered calling her. A direct confrontation over the phone. But that would be a tactical error. It would grant her the advantage of distance, the time to formulate a new set of lies. No. The confrontation had to be in person. He needed to see her face when her system of deceit collapsed. He wanted her to face the auditor of her betrayal. In the flesh. He wanted to be the one to control the narrative. At 4 a.m, with the first light of Zurich barely illuminating the sky, Victor made a decision. He opened his laptop, logged onto the airline's website, and rebooked his flight. He cancelled his appearance at the final panel of the conference, composing a brief, formal email to the organizers citing a critical family emergency. He booked a seat on the last flight out that evening. With the time difference, he would be home in the early hours of the morning. Unannounced. Unexpected. There would be no time for her to clean the scene, to hide the evidence. He closed the laptop. For the first time in hours, the chaotic surge of emotion was replaced by something else, something familiar and comforting, the calm, clean focus of a plan. He felt anger, yes. But it was a controlled burn. And beneath it, a steely determination. The risk had been identified. Now, it was time to mitigate it. Permanently. The flight back across the Atlantic felt suspended in time. Victor sat by the window, staring out at the seamless black canvas of the night sky, but he saw nothing. His mind was a flurry of calculations, running scenario after scenario for the confrontation to come. He rehearsed his lines, tested different tones. A part of his logical brain, the part that still clung to the 6 years of shared data, searched for an alternative explanation. Perhaps Reese was just a friend. Perhaps the kiss was a European-style greeting, misunderstood. He immediately dismissed these hypotheses as statistical impossibilities. The data was overwhelming. He was lying to himself. And Victor Sterling did not tolerate inaccurate self-assessment. There was no innocent explanation. Cora was cheating on him. In their house. In their bed. While he was away generating the income that funded her artistic world, she was with another man. He clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. The physical sensation helped to ground him, to focus the rage that was building inside him like pressure in a sealed container. He took a deep, controlled breath. Just as he did before a high-stakes board meeting. Control the breathing. Control the mind. The plane landed at 2:40 in the morning. The airport was a ghost town, echoing and sterile. Victor moved through the empty corridors with purpose. He collected his carry-on, cleared customs with an automated kiosk, and walked straight to the long-term parking garage. He got in his car, a sensible, reliable sedan, and started the engine. The silence inside the vehicle was absolute as he drove down the deserted highways. Crestwood was asleep. The streetlights cast a jaundiced, orange glow on the wet asphalt from a recent rain. He drove slowly as he approached his street, his headlights cutting through the darkness. When he turned the corner, his eyes immediately locked onto his house. And there it was. The black coupe, parked in his garage. The evidence was still in place. His stomach tightened. He pulled his car over 2 houses down, cut the engine, and sat there for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. His heart was pounding, an involuntary physiological reaction he could not suppress. He took another controlled breath. Then another. He was ready. He grabbed his bag, stepped out of the car, and walked silently along the darkened sidewalk. He approached his own house like a stranger. An intruder. He reached the front door and slid his key into the lock. He turned it with practiced slowness, minimizing the sound of the tumblers. He stepped inside and shut the door behind him, the latch clicking into place with a sound that seemed deafening in the stillness. The house was silent, save for the low, constant hum of the stainless steel refrigerator in the kitchen. A single lamp was on in the living room, casting long shadows across the floor. He set his bag down quietly. Then he started up the stairs. Each step, groaning faintly under his weight. He was an anomaly in his own home. A ghost at his own wake. He paused at the top of the landing. Listening. Nothing. He walked to the master bedroom. The door was ajar. He placed his hand on the cool wood. And pushed it open. Slowly. The soft glow of a bedside lamp illuminated the scene. Cora was asleep, her back to the door. But she was not alone. Reese Fallon was lying beside her. One of his arms was flung across the pillow where Victor's head should have been. A wave of heat, pure and white-hot, washed up Victor's neck. He felt a disconnect, as if he were watching a film. This was the final, irrefutable data point. He walked into the room, crossed to the wall by the door, and flipped on the overhead light. The sudden, harsh flood of light was a shock to the system. Cora jolted awake, blinking in confusion, her hand flying up to shield her eyes. When her vision cleared and focused on Victor standing at the foot of the bed, her face went slack with shock. The color drained from it, leaving a pale, sickly mask. Reese stirred at her movement, turning over. He saw Victor, and for a long, silent second, the three of them were frozen in a tableau of domestic horror. The silence was absolute. A vacuum where a life used to be. Then Victor spoke. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the silence with the precision of a scalpel. It was low, cold, and laced with a corrosive sarcasm. "So, this is Chloe," he said, his gaze fixed on Reese. "Funny. I remember her differently. I thought she had longer hair. And was a woman." Cora's mouth opened and closed, but only fragmented sounds came out. "Victor. I can explain. This isn't." He raised a hand, a gesture that was both a stop sign and a dismissal. "No," he stated, his voice flat. "You can't. There is no explanation that recalibrates this reality." He pulled his phone from his pocket, unlocked it, and opened the video file. He turned the screen toward her, the footage of the garage kiss playing on a loop in the silent room. "I saw it all, Cora. Every frame. The kiss. You walking into my house with him. Everything. The data is comprehensive." Cora covered her face with her hands, a choked sob escaping her lips. Reese, on the other hand, attempted to regain some composure. He sat up in bed, pulling the sheet up to his waist. He was wearing only boxer shorts. "Look, man," he began, his voice rough with sleep. "This is complicated." Victor took a single, deliberate step forward. Reese instinctively recoiled. "Complicated?" Victor let out a short, humorless laugh. "Complicated is structuring a multinational merger. Complicated is navigating Byzantine tax law. This isn't complicated, Reese. This is betrayal. This is you. Sleeping with another man's wife, in his house. In his bed, while he is away on business." Reese's attempt at bravado evaporated. "You work at the same gallery as her, don't you? Reese Fallon. Sculptor." Victor continued, his voice relentless. "I know who you are. I've seen your pictures with her on social media. I've seen the comments. I've seen everything. Your digital footprint is remarkably careless." Reese swallowed hard. I think I should go." Victor moved, blocking the path to the door. His posture was not overtly threatening, but his presence filled the space, an immovable object. "You're not going anywhere, until I am finished." The calmness in his voice was more menacing than any shout could have been. It made Reese freeze. "You have destroyed a family, Reese. 6 years of marriage. 6 years of trust. All for what? An illicit thrill? Because you thought you could get away with it?" Victor took another step closer. "I hope it was worth the risk. Because I assure you, the consequences will be severe. When I am done, everyone will know exactly who you are. And what you did." At this, Cora scrambled out of bed, desperation in her eyes. "Victor, please. Listen to me. I made a mistake. A terrible one. But I still love you. We can fix this." Victor turned his gaze to her, and the cold fury in his eyes made her shrink back. "You love me?" He laughed again, a bitter, grating sound. "You love me so much that you brought another man into our bed? You lied about your cousin just to have a cover story in case a neighbor saw his car. You planned this, Cora. This wasn't a mistake. A mistake is a rounding error. This was a deliberate, calculated choice." She collapsed into sobs. "I was lonely. You're always traveling, always busy. I just wanted to feel desired again." The anger in Victor finally gave way to something colder, heavier. Disappointment. "So, it's my fault," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "My fault. I work to provide for this house, for this life you seem to enjoy so much. And my work is the justification for your betrayal. A fascinating piece of emotional accounting." He took a step back, clearing the path to the door. "Get out, Reese. Now." Reese didn't need to be told twice. He snatched his pants from the floor, pulled them on with clumsy haste, and practically ran from the room. Seconds later, Victor heard the front door slam shut, followed by the sound of the coupe's engine roaring to life and speeding away into the night. Cora sat on the edge of the bed, her body shaking with sobs. Victor looked at her, the woman he had married, the central pillar of his personal life, and felt a profound sense of detachment. The emotional asset he had invested in for 6 years had revealed itself to be fraudulent. He was looking at a total loss. "I'll sleep on the couch," he said, his voice an empty monotone. "Tomorrow, we begin discussing the divorce." Her head snapped up, her eyes red and pleading. "Victor, No. Please. We can go to therapy. We can. No, he interrupted, the word sharp and final. Therapy cannot fix a structural failure of this magnitude, Cora. You destroyed the trust. Without trust, there is no marriage. The system has failed. It's time to decommission it. He left the room without a backward glance. Walked down the stairs, and lay down on the living room sofa, still in his travel clothes. He did not sleep. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sounds of her crying from upstairs. He was processing the breach, calculating his next moves. The next morning, he woke early. He showered in the downstairs bathroom and put on a clean suit. He made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and called his lawyer. He explained the situation with the detached clarity of a field agent delivering a report. He detailed the security footage, the screenshots, the social media evidence. The lawyer, a pragmatic and expensive man, confirmed that Victor had an ironclad case for divorce based on adultery, and the evidence would make the process of asset division swift and favorable. Victor thanked him and hung up. Cora came downstairs a while later, her face pale and swollen. She tried to speak, to offer another useless apology, but Victor raised his hand. I am not interested in excuses or justifications, he said calmly. I just wanted to inform you that I have already contacted my lawyer. You will receive the divorce papers in the next few days. I suggest you retain your own counsel. She slumped into a chair at the table, her head bowed. What about the house? She whispered. We'll sell it. The assets will be split according to the law. But given the incontrovertible proof of infidelity, do not expect a 50-50 division. The prenup is quite clear on forfeiture clauses in cases of gross misconduct. He finished his coffee and stood up. I'll be staying at a hotel while this is sorted out. I have no desire to sleep in this house anymore. But Victor's plan was not yet complete. He was not a vengeful man by nature, vengefulness was inefficient. But he was a man who believed in accountability. Actions have consequences. Risks, when realized, result in losses. He went back to Reese Fallon's social media profile and conducted a more thorough search. He discovered that Reese was also married. His wife's name was Fiona, and their profile pictures showed them with a young son, no older than 3. Victor felt a momentary flicker of something guilt, perhaps, but he suppressed it. It was an irrelevant emotional artifact. Fiona deserved to know the truth about the man she was married to, just as he had. She was an unsecured stakeholder in this crisis. And she needed to be informed. He downloaded the security footage from the cloud. He edited it cleanly, trimming it down to only the essential data points, the arrival of the black coupe, the long and intimate kiss, the two of them entering the house together. He attached the video file to a direct message and sent it to Fiona Fallon. He included a brief, factual note. I believe you have a right to see this. This was filmed in my garage last night. The woman is my wife, Cora. The man is your husband, Reese. He did not wait for a reply. He sent the message, and then he blocked her profile. The information had been delivered. The task was complete. 2 weeks later, Victor heard through the city's tightly knit art community grapevine that Fiona had filed for divorce. Reese lost custody of his son, and was forced to move out of his home and studio. The story of his affair, backed by undeniable video proof, spread like wildfire. Clients began to cancel commissions. The gallery that represented him, worried about its reputation, terminated his contract. He was last heard of taking a low-paying teaching job in a provincial town, far from the life he had built. Cora suffered her own set of consequences. She lost several of her most important clients, particularly married women who were uncomfortable being represented by someone who had cheated so flagrantly. In a community built on relationships and trust, her reputation was destroyed. The divorce moved quickly, just as his lawyer had predicted. Victor presented his evidence. The judge ruled decisively in his favor. He kept the majority of their shared investments. The house sold for a good price. Cora sent him several long, pleading text messages. He read them, analyzed their content for any new information, found none, and then deleted them. The day the divorce was finalized, he blocked her number. There was nothing left to say. He bought a smaller, modern apartment in a different neighborhood. He started therapy. Not to process grief, he had already moved on, but to analyze the event and develop improved protocols for future relationships. His therapist helped him frame the betrayal not as a personal failure, but as a failure in his initial risk assessment of Cora. People, the therapist noted, are not always rational actors. 6 months after the divorce, Victor was promoted to Regional Director of European Operations. He traveled more than ever, but he didn't mind. The work was a clean, logical system. He started dating again, cautiously. He learned to trust again, but differently. His trust was now conditional, subject to ongoing verification. He would never be caught by an unmonitored variable again. A year after the separation, Victor sat on the balcony of his new apartment, sipping a glass of single malt scotch and watching the sunset over Crestwood. He thought about Cora, not with anger or sadness, but with the quiet acceptance of a closed case file. She had made a choice based on her own flawed emotional calculus. He had made a series of choices based on logic and self-preservation. He chose not to tolerate betrayal. He chose not to live within a compromised system. He chose to reclaim his dignity, his security, and his future. Victor finished his scotch, set the empty glass down on the table, and smiled. It was not a bitter smile, but one of quiet satisfaction. He was free, free from the lies, free from the chaos, free to start over, with a stronger, more secure system. And that, he realized, was the best outcome of all. Not destroying their lives they had done that themselves, but rebuilding his own. With dignity, with purpose, and with the absolute certainty that he had done the right thing. He stood up, walked inside, and slid the balcony door shut behind him. The past was behind him, and for the first time in a very long time, the future felt entirely, predictably, under his control. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next.